All right. Hey, everybody. Man, that was just so weak. Hi, everybody. My ego needs to be stroked every now and then, you guys. I like that. A little more oomph out of you there. Welcome to Resurrection Recovery. My name is Tom Langhofer. I'm pastor of Recovery Ministries here, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. So glad you're here for our, this is our third week of bringing the meal program back. So we're still trying to work out all the kinks and all that sort of stuff, but we're so glad you're here, and we'll do pizza, and then I'm going to start bringing the restaurants back, so we'll start having some restaurants bring in food for us. I'm just trying to give them a little break since they're trying to recover from COVID too. But we'll get this thing up and running again and back to the way it used to be pre-COVID. So we start the meal around 5:30 to about 5:45, and then we've got somebody sharing their testimony. Every Thursday, that's to me the most important. You know, I always say pastors like to preach. I don't like to, but most do. And that's fine, but to hear somebody's personal experience, strength, and hope, to me, as a person in recovery, beats a sermon any day. So we do that, and then at 7 o'clock, we break into the different support groups. So we're gonna get right to it because I'm a couple minutes behind. The guy that I had scheduled to come is a no-show. I have no idea where he is. But we're actually in for a good treat because we got Tyler, who runs our young adult group, and just on the fly asked him if he would share his testimony, and he's agreed to do it. So some of you may have heard it, but if you hadn't, it's an awesome story. So Tyler, thank you for zero preparation. Zero preparation, and I so appreciate you doing this. And with that, it's all yours, brother.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm an alcoholic. To my friends at ACT, I hope you enjoy repetition. But anywho, all right, so I got about 25 minutes, so here goes nothing. So I was born, obviously, and and moved to the house I stayed at for a long time, and childhood was impeccable. Had two loving parents, and they were really nice, and they probably gave me a little too many gifts. And I kind of just kind of wallowed around like a 5-year-old, but the big deal happened. So I go to elementary school, and I meet a ton of people, and I'm in kindergarten, and I call the teacher Cookie, okay? And you might think that's quite innocent, but I realized that some pretty girls laughed at me when I called the teacher Cookie. And I realized that was the best feeling I'd ever had up until that point, was some pretty girls laughing at me. So I was like, well, I'm gonna do that more. And so I continued, and even at 5 years old, I don't know how most 5-year-olds are, but I'm just so addicted to what people think of me. The second I got validation, I was like, well, I'm just gonna do this more. And so revisiting my childhood, I kind of realized I kind of lost out on a childhood in a sense, because instead of just like playing games and having fun, like even at 5 years old, I'm just concerned of what everyone thinks of me. And I just want everyone to, think I'm funny and whatever. And so if there's any, doubt that I'm an addict, I can just remember that even at 5, all I thought about was what people thought of me. And so, I go through elementary school and I get to middle school. Middle school's a big deal too, because there's social hierarchies in middle school. And if I wasn't at the top of mine, then I felt like I was gonna die. So even at sixth grade, all I'm thinking about and all I'm doing is maneuvering myself intricately on how to ascend the social hierarchy of the 6th graders, right? And I actually got pretty good at it because I got in the popular group, and I always thought the other people in the popular group were way cooler than me, way prettier than me, or more handsome than me, and I never felt like I stacked up, So school's miserable because I'm coming every single day, trying to just keep my status, right? That's all I cared about, and so. I have all this pressure on me all the time, and I'm hanging out with my buddy Weiss in 8th grade, and we're about to go to sleep, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to go smoke some weed." And I was just like, "Well, can I join you, please?" And I, followed him to the bathroom, and we smoked weed like two imbeciles, and so I took a lot of hits, and I get back into his bedroom. And he walks in, he finishes up his deal, and he walks in and goes, "Hey, how do you feel?" And I go, "This is the best feeling I've ever had in my entire life, Weiss. Thank you." And it really, well, A, it was, but B, it was so transformative because it was the first time I didn't care what anyone thought of me. It was the first time in my life I felt like I had some hope of like, okay, I can actually live my life and be at some level of peace. I will be able to get through this thing. Like, my whole life's just been one big fat problem, and that's how it's always felt. And that was the first time my life went from a problem to something that I was excited to live, in a sense, because I had drugs, And so I'm only 13. And my number one focus is now drugs because that has ascended any other experience I've ever had. And in fact, it made every other experience prior to using drugs seem pretty stupid and worthless, right? And so everything else took a backseat. And I bought a lot of weed, and then I got caught really quickly because I'm really bad at not getting caught. And so I get caught. And my parents are like, "All right, you got to go to this therapist." And I was like, "All right, fine." And so I go to this therapist, and, great guy. I'm sure he's helped a lot of people, but I was not ready to be helped. I'd only smoked weed like 8 times, but you get the deal. And this beautiful thing happened. Well, maybe it's not beautiful, but this thing happened, and I realized that I have this incredible power to manipulate anybody, because even at 14, my parents are right here, and the therapist is right here, and they're asking me all these questions, and I just have this like incredible intuitive sense on how to just navigate any situation I need to get out of it, right? And why do I need to navigate it so well? Well, because I need to go back to drinking and using, right? I have to. And so because when someone takes away the drugs or the alcohol for me, that's my lifeline. It's not really like an extracurricular activity or something I even really enjoy doing. You're literally taking away my lungs in a sense of like, this is my oxygen. This is the only reason I live right now, is because drugs and alcohol, I get every responsibility done. Every single one of them. Because once all my responsibilities are dealt with, I can now use in peace. And that's the only thing I care about. I don't even care if I hang out with people anymore. The second I wake up, I'm thinking about where am I going to get weed? And then the second, I go to bed, I'm thinking about where am I going to get weed tomorrow? And then everything in between is when am I going to be high? And then when I am high, it's like, oh, thank God, And so I get out of this therapist, and at 15, I discover hallucinogens and pills, and those are fantastic. And then I discover alcohol, and that was incredible. And then I discovered that you can snort pills, and then I discovered that you can snort pills while drunk. And then that synergetic effect is really where, where it happens, right? And so I am just flat out addicted. And, my grandpa always used to say, when I was younger, he's like, "Don't drink too much alcohol, because if you do, there's going to be this switch in your brain that flips, and you're just never going to be able to recover, and you're going to, drink like an alcoholic." And that just did not happen to me. The second I used, instantly knew that that's what my life was going to be defined by. So anywho, things start getting really bad, and I'm seeing all these therapists and whatever, and my drug problem is getting really, really bad. And what happens is So I get grounded a lot. And then what happens is my parents go, okay, so every time you fail a drug test, which we're going to do every single week, then you're going to be grounded for 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, well, that sucks. And so there's no way I'm going to be able to ever pass a drug test, ever, you know? And so what I would do is that I would go really hard for a week and then just stay in misery for 2 weeks waiting for my grounding to be over. And then I would go really hard, and I got really fed up with it. So I convinced my parents that I really needed Ambien to go to sleep at night. So we went to a psychiatrist, and I got him to prescribe me Ambien. And this is all at 16. I mean, this is just malevolent, right? And so I get prescribed Ambien, and so I'm drinking every night, and I'm snorting Ambien every night, and anywho, what happens is I'm snorting my Ambien one night, and I do it in my bathroom because I'm really smart, you know, because they're going to be like, oh, he's using the bathroom. So I'm snorting my Ambien one night, and I have the thing in my nose, and like there's an empty alcohol, you know, cup right here, and I look because I hear something, and I look, and my door was opened about that much, and I look at my mom, and she's looking right at me through the, you know, the angle of the mirror, and so I'm like, oh God, well, this is bad, you know. I mean, the line's right there. I mean, I'm really screwed, and I'm just like, well, I don't really have a choice here, so I snort the Ambien right in front of my mom while she's looking, and it just broke her heart. And I mean, I had broken her heart a lot, but, you know, that made all the other heartbreaks look like, you know, bumps in the road kind of thing. And so I think my parents were really scared to like send me to a real rehab. Like they would keep like getting more intense therapy sessions or like more times a week. But I think they knew that if they sent me to like a real rehab, then that would like confirm, you know, the very reasonable proposition that I'm indeed an alcoholic. And so, you know, I knew the jig was up. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen? And so they end up sending me, I have to convince them to not send me to like Utah or North Carolina, right? And, you know, and so we end up going to this place called Crossroads, which is a youth drug and alcohol treatment program. And if you haven't heard of it, if you've heard of Full Circle, very similar. And they treat like 13 to roughly 28-year-olds. And so I join, and so I use my first day, of course, and then I use my second day, and I keep using, and then the head counselor comes up to me, and he's like, listen, dude, if you're gonna stay here, you basically have to like really stop. So I have to drop out of school, get rid of all my social medias, get rid of my wallet, so I basically had like a roof, and then like a phone to call people on, and then like, you know, enough money to like have some McDonald's for the day during outpatient. And I will tell you what, I hated it so much. Not a single fiber of my being in any way, shape, or form was remotely content with getting sober. In fact, I was so vehemently opposed to it that I would sit in utter fuming anger practically every second I wasn't intensely distracted by something. I mean, I was furious that I had to get sober. And you know, and then they take away everything, and you know, whatever. And I continue to get high because when we would go to gas stations when no one was looking, I would just like steal a bunch of Robitussin, right? And you know, from the gas station thing and bring it home. And so they eventually come up to me and they're like, listen, you got to go to step 2. And I was like, that's their affiliated inpatient program, right? And so I was like, well, fine. And so I'm like, if I go to step 2, then maybe I can do my 45 days there. And then once I'm done with that inpatient, then I can come home and use again. Because that's you know, I'm always, every single time I comply to any direction given by an authority, it's usually because I think that is going to be the fastest route to recuperate my powers in being able to get high, right? Or drink or whatever. And so I go, fine, I'll go to this stupid inpatient. And so I get on a plane with 1 day sober and I go to step 2. And step 2 is like Crossroads, which is kind of like AA, except like intense times 40 or 50 probably. I mean, it's like you're around counselors 24/7. You have 6 hours of outpatient a day. You live in a residential household. You go to 5 meetings a week. You have function. I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? I mean, it's really recovery. Like there's no getting away from that. And so I go there, and I'm just playing it cool. I'm just trying to, get everyone, say that I'm doing good. And what happens is that I cannot play it cool any longer because I've never been sober for longer than a week, right? For like 2 years. And so I'm like getting to 10 days and then 11 days and then 12 days. And it's becoming increasingly more unbearable. And there's this line in the big book that says something along the lines of like, we blot out our intolerable situation, or the blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation. And that just wouldn't work anymore. I could not blot it out anymore. It always lingered right under the surface, but it was like bulging out like a bad pimple. And I just couldn't, I couldn't avoid it anymore. And so I was in this van one day and everyone was having a great time. We were coming home from Sedona and I just could not stop thinking about how I wanted to kill everyone at that stupid rehab. And I mean, I really got malevolent. I got to such a low point that I wanted to do danger and harm to other people because I needed them to feel the complete and total misery that just, fumigated my body. And so I turned into a very, very sick person. I'd never been that sick before. And so I realized this. I was like, well, I got 30 days left. I can discharge myself, and, well, that's just going to be terrible because I'm just going to go home, and then my parents are going to send me to Utah. And this has got to be better than Utah. And then I can kill myself here, but that would really suck too. And once I think about killing myself, I'm like, well, all these people love me, like probably not the deal. And then I was like, and I had this insane intuition. I go, or I could be honest about how I feel. And it was like this, it was like, if you're new, or you've been in and out, I'm sure you understand the feeling of going in and out of meetings and everyone's, get a sponsor. And you're like, yeah. And then it's like, you got to be honest. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. And, you just hanging out, right? And it's like, not really going anywhere, but like, it's better than getting high actively, which is, I guess, sitting in this meeting, regardless of what my mental state is currently. And I just go, you know what? I'm going to be honest about how I feel. And so I walk into my room, once we got out of that wretched van ride, and I grab my notebook and I write down everything I'm lying about, every single thing. It was like, well, probably not every single thing, but like just what came to mind ended up being like 3 full pages, right? And I just could not stop writing. And so I go into outpatient next day with so much shame. It's unbelievable, And so I would not share it in outpatient, right? I would not share it. I only would do it to my outpatient counselor one-on-one. So I'm like, during lunch, I'm like, listen, I got to talk. And she's like, okay. And so I'm like, hey, I'm lying about everything and I'm going to be honest with you. And this was easily like one of the most courageous things I've ever done in my life. And I don't know what propelled me to get this burst of courage. I think it was the fact that I was going to kill myself if I didn't do this. And that's some, that's a pretty heavy situation. I've become willing to do things that I on a daily basis wouldn't be willing to do if it was Utah or kill myself. And so I'm honest. And this is what happened. So I'm like being honest, and I look up, and my voice is starting to cackle a little bit. I'm starting to crack, because it's so emotional. And my walls, I've never let my walls down in my life, ever, not once. I've been lying ever since I knew how to speak the English language. And this is the first time I've ever let my walls down. And I look up at the outpatient counselor, and she has a tear coming out right here, because what's happening is nothing short of beautiful. And I just start crying. Well, for the most part, I wasn't like sobbing tears, but I've never had my walls down like that. And that feeling that made me incessantly get drunk and high 24/7. I'm sorry. the feeling that I got that I aspired to get from using all the time, feeling actually fulfilled, okay, cared about, loved, actually came. The feeling that I've always desired of being okay and knowing that everything's going to be all right. All these things that I crave. There was someone said, I think it was like C.S. Lewis or something like that, or he said that every alcoholic just has like a low level reaching for God all the time. And I think that is so true, because I always just want to know that I'm going to be okay. I always want to know that I'm loved. I always want to, know that I'm cared about. And that's why I did drugs all the time, because the fear that I have to walk through to get that feeling, to get connected, because I'm so afraid of people, and so to have to walk through that fear of getting to know someone and allowing someone to know me is so terrifying. But I know that that's what is essentially the magic pill. That's what's going to get me okay, is being connected to a group of people, like for real. And so I would just do drugs all the time because it was so much easier. And that feeling that I always aspired to get drugs came once I was finally honest. And it was so powerful that I was so dumbfounded by the experience that I looked right at her and I go, listen, I will give you in this stupid program. And by the way, this rehab is extremely 12-step oriented, so the parallels there. And I look at her and I go, I'll give you 2 weeks of this stupid program. I'll give you 2 weeks. That's all you get. Make it good. And we would get these treatment plans, right? And, it was basically how to work the steps kind of for kids in a sense, because it was like, if you try to read the big book as a 16-year-old, you're like, okay, what's going on? So they make it pragmatic and practical to apply. And I did every single thing on that treatment plan like my life depended on it, because in reality it did. And what I experienced in those 2 weeks were probably that, and then the 5th week were the 3 weeks of step 2, week number 3, 4, and 5, when I decided to work the 12 steps, were the best 3 weeks of my entire life. I never felt that, I don't even think there's a word for it. I never felt that free. I knew that I was free. And it was a feeling that is impossible to get from drinking and using. Impossible. And we'll kill ourselves trying to get there. The big book says we chase this, feeling or whatever to the gates of insanity and death. And I chased whatever the hell this 12-step thing was, and it actually worked. The difference between this and drinking was that I had to actually there's another line in the first step of the 12 and 12, and it talks about how who cares to be honest and humble? Who cares to reach out and share the message to other alcoholics who still suffer? Who cares to embark in prayer and meditation? Well, not a lot of people, unless you need to do it to survive. And I knew that was it. So I had completely ingrained the first step into me, because I knew I was going to die without this thing. And what I did, and I couldn't put it in words at the time, but what I did was I ingrained steps 2 and 3 into my life. I knew that I didn't know it was God, but I knew there was something out there. Whatever those 12 steps were divinely inspired, something along the lines that was better than my way. And so I went out and did it with passion, and I completely surrendered. It was like, you told me to jump, and instead of me jumping, I would first ask you, how high should I jump? My thinking was nulled. I was done. I knew that there wasn't a single productive possible thing that could come out of my own will anymore. And so I capitulated. And what happened was, really, so that was in May of 2017, and now obviously it's July, and the day I got on that plane is my sobriety date, because I came home and I told myself, that's better than drugs, and if I do drugs again, or if I drink again, I'm going to die probably. And there's maybe not instantly, but there's little doubt that in the future it would occur, and I've just kept it going. And, I came home and I completed Crossroads and I joined AA, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs. I've probably been in lower points in my sobriety than I ever got getting drunk or high. And I actually don't even think that needs to be a debate or contemplated very much. That is absolutely infallibly true. But on the contrary, what that's allowed me to do, when I overcome those by working the 12 steps with diligence and honesty and vulnerability, the highs I get are so incomparable to any experience that I could have on drugs or alcohol if I ever did it again, that I think talking about it would almost be a waste of time, because that's how good my life gets when I, work these 12 steps. It's what works for me. I've seen so many people come to the program and do exactly what happened to me, which is fiddle around with it, throw it away, come back, throw it away, and then just go, you know what, it's my time. And then the second they say, it's my time, whether they're obstinate towards God or don't want to read the inventory or don't want to work on their defect, whatever it is, because I've had all those complaints before. I tell myself, once they go, it's my time, I've seen that exact miracle happen in their life that happened in my own life. And it keeps happening. And the more I put my head down and work the 12 steps, it always happens. The last thing I'll end with is the promises. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. My favorite promise is after it goes through all the, the great things, it says, it will always materialize if we work for them. That's my favorite promise, because that makes every single other one legitimate, because that is candid, direct direction saying that if you do these 12 steps, you will get everything the promises entail. You will get every single thing undoubtedly. And every time I lose my faith, I work the 12 steps regardless of how I feel or what I'm thinking. And then my faith is reinvigorated on a level that was greater than it was before. So anywho, that's really all I got. Thanks for letting me share, guys.
I had no doubt that on the fly, this guy could pull a great testimony off, right? How many of us could do that, just say, hey, 2 minutes before, will you share your testimony? But I knew he would. So thanks, Tyler, for doing that and being vulnerable and leading our young adult group. I mean, what are you, 4 or 5 years? 4 years? 4 years clean and sober, at age 20. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. I could never have done that. So, all right, well, we are at the point where we take a break, and then you all head off to your support groups, and we will see you next Thursday at, we start serving at 5:30, so anytime after that. Thanks a lot, y'all.